and providing the services that so bless and benefit our lives. We pray for their safety and well-being at all times. We pray this evening as we deliberate and discuss items of business that may be for the good and will help the city grow and develop and provide a great place to live for the citizens of North Ogden. We pray now that Thou be with us in all that we do and say this evening. We humbly pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Discussion and or action to consider March 5th and March 19th City Council meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion to that effect.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is now open for any public comments. Please state your name and address.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Chug and North Ogden City Council. My name is Greg Sorensen, and I reside at 2180 North Fruitland Drive. I was born and raised here in North Ogden, and I purchased my home for my parents. Moved back here 20 years ago. And as a result of our expanding family, my wife and I have desired to increase the size of our home, either in a rebuild or remodel. However, there are some limitations that we're having with the current city ordinance. Currently, to begin with, my property is a 5-sided lot. It's a unique property, and it is in an RE20 zoning. And the current ordinances require a minimum 10-foot setback for the side yard and a 20-foot setback for the rear yard. We have approximately 150 feet of backyard, but with the 5-sided lot, one small portion is considered backyard, and the current ordinance requires that I extend the new construction forward to meet the 20-foot setback, having a negative impact on my property. I'm asking the City Council to consider rendering relief from the ordinance by considering this small backyard to be deemed as a side yard, thus allowing more even flow to the setbacks, which reflect 10 feet, 10 feet, and 10 feet. I've been working with North Ogden City staff members, Robert Scott, the planning director, Nate Davis, building inspector, and I've been in communication with John Call, city attorney, and was given the recommendation to speak with you members of the North Ogden City Council to ask if you would consider giving relief in the text of this particular zoning ordinance by allowing the North Ogden City staff to make an exception in this unique circumstance. And so I do have a map, and may I approach the bench, Mayor?
Sure.
Currently, the zoning, this is my house here. This is the addition or the add-on that we'd like to make. And so the current ordinance requires 10 feet in the yellow, and also 20 feet here where this is considered a backyard. And what I'm asking is relief of the text to allow this to be, the pink to be yellow, or a 10-foot backyard. Where the backyard, I have 150 feet right here, and it's considered a 5-sided lot. And so, once again, with the current ordinance, the pink area, the ordinance states that I have to have a 20-foot setback. And I'd like the setback to be 10 feet, which would allow the structure to be closer to the home. So Anyway, I thank you for your consideration, and may I leave this with you? And then
Okay.
I'll stay in touch with Robert Scott, who directed me to come and speak with you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you for your comments. And
So John, I just, what, I'm not sure how we do that and how the process is there, if that's what we want to do. I'm not opposed to it, I'm just not sure how the process, and I'm not sure how it impacts the people behind.
So we'd need to amend the text of the ordinance is the way to do it, to allow for either a review to allow for this type of special modification outside of a variance, or to just change the language to redefine what a side lot line is. So that the lot line that he showed you is about 250 feet. It's a very long line with kind of a zig in it. And as soon as it does that little zigzag movement, it then becomes a rear lot line from that point on because of the way our code reads. And so what we could do is maybe add some language that says if it's a minor adjustment, I think that's like a 10 or 15 foot zigzag, that it could still be considered a side lot line. And so that's the kind of the issue that we're running into. But so it'd go to the planning commission for a recommendation for an ordinance change and then come back to you for final approval.
I mean, I'd like to see something like that, but I
Okay.
think that's a good option, so.
I know we're not discussing this tonight, but when I looked at those two drawings, if the house were originally built as the final product would look like, wouldn't all of that be considered side yard because it's on the side of the house?
So the current side of the house, the way our ordinance is written, probably not the way it was when it was built, 40 years ago or whenever, would consider that a rear lot line as well. Although because the house is there, it doesn't have to move or be changed. It gets
Okay.
to stay as is.
Okay,
So,
I'm with Carl.
okay, so we'll take it to the planning commission and get some language worked up and back.
Great.
So,
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
thanks for coming.
Thanks, Greg.
We welcome the Cub Scout troop. Which troop are you from?
Act 494 from Pleasant View.
Okay, welcome this evening. Yes,
Brett Hamblin, 963 Deer Meadows Drive. I'd like to start my discussion here with, I appreciate all of the work that you've done. I've been to one or two of the meetings where you've been talking budget issues, and I really appreciate the work, and it appears very in-depth that you councilmen have all been working on as far as budget stuff. And just kind of I don't know how to necessarily approach this, but I quit my first job after college because of low pay issues. And after 33 years of federal service at Hill Air Force Base, I went through at least 2 times where there was a 0%, a lot of years very small, but 0% pay increase. One year we even got a reduction in pay working out there. And the health insurance premiums, they always seem to be going up, where we felt fairly lucky after years working there and got used to things, fairly lucky if the pay increase covered the health insurance increase type thing. Bottom line, I love the services that we get in this city. I love to be able to call 911 if there's any kind of an issue and get response. My street's in good shape. I get good water out of my faucet, all that kind of stuff. I mean, all this stuff costs money, I know. And it's going up. Look at the price of gas today. Look at the price of goods at the stores and everything. Bottom line, everything's going up. And I think two things. One, it's costing the city more to maintain and do what we do. And as far as people, employees for the city, they deserve to keep pay up, good benefits and so forth. And I think it behooves us to do that kind of a thing. You know, I know there's studies, and you probably know way more than me about this. How much do we lose if we lose an employee and have to spend time to groom a new person when they're not productive to start with, or to get them up to speed and so forth, to where if we had good pay and could keep those people, the ones that, you know, we want to keep and know the job and so forth, we'd be better off. Bottom line, I know everybody hates it, including myself, but in listening to some of the discussions before, I'm one vote of a modest increase in the taxes from the city, because you discussed at least one other meeting how long it's been since the city's increased the tax rate. I'm one to vote for a yes. You know, with the cost of everything and to try and keep good people, I vote do a modest increase if we have to try and keep everything going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your suggestions. Yeah.
I'm Jonathan Arrington. I'm representing Sierra Homes tonight. I'm coming here to ask the council to see if they will waive the permit fees for Mark and Holly Kemke. They've been started a remodel about a year ago in their house, and they haven't finished it. Sierra Homes and Lifestyle Homes and the Northern Wasatch Home Builders Association are going to get together and go in and finish their house out. So we got to get a permit to do some small wiring and add some lights in some rooms that they don't have lights. I don't know if you remember about a year ago, their son died in a tragic accident. He was up camping or something, and he got shot by a stray bullet. So we're just coming here to see what you guys will do. They told me to come here in the office and present it to you guys, and you guys could discuss on what you can do and not do as far as waiving the permit fee and doing the inspections. It's some small wiring. We're gonna do new kitchen cabinets, new countertops, add some can lights. So
That's the Kemke family, right?
that is Mark and Holly Kemke. Any
Okay, yeah.
questions or?
I'd just defer to John on what the process would be.
So typically, we haven't waived fees in the past, typically because we have to find a way to fund it. We've had other similar things. I think this one, the building permit's likely to be under $200, and I think there's a good chance that we could maybe even raise that in the group tonight. I know that sounds funny, but I'm happy to contribute to just, so it's not taxpayer money, but it's coming from another source. And Annette says she's got some money to throw in too, so,
I'll go.
okay. So so I think we'll get it paid for, it just won't be taxpayer money.
Okay. So I just need to get a file for that?
Yeah, we'll get the amount and then we'll come to them with our hats.
Thank you. Okay.
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 Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just come talk to you tomorrow.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to the active agenda. Discussion on 2019-2020 budget. Our presenter will be Evan Nelson, Finance Director. Evan, it's now yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome back to the budget. Thanks for your patience and your investment in the budget process. I think we're making good progress, and the end is in sight. So we have a presentation here that we'll walk through to cover a few things. So here's the budget calendar from today moving forward. We have some discussions on the general fund, 401k, transportation funds, and utility rates tonight. We are planning to propose adoption of the tentative budget on May 14th. Then we'll have our public hearing related to the budget on May 28th. And then we'll propose final budget adoption on June 11th. So that's our plan moving forward. If you can go to the next slide. Again, this is the fund structure. We've reviewed proposed budgets for most of the funds that you see up there. There are 4 transportation funds that we haven't really talked in detail about. Those have been included in the packet tonight. And they include the Transportation Utility Fund, Transportation Impact Fee Fund, Transportation Sales Tax Fund, and the 400-450 East Improvement Fund. those, at least in the proposed budget this year, those funds relate to the road and intersection widening project that is part of the proposed budget. So we'll go over a little bit more detail on those. In the council packet, up till now, we've been giving you pieces of the budget, just the funds that we would be discussing. In the council packet this time, we gave you the whole packet, so you now have all of the funds, and so it's a complete budget at this point. Not that it's final, we're still making adjustments, and we'll discuss some things tonight. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this sort of completes our circle where we've been able to review each of the city funds once we complete our discussion tonight. Next slide. So first we'll talk about the general fund, and we've discussed many different options in the general fund in our previous meetings. I think maybe there has been a need for some clarity on the retirement benefits, so I just wanted to explain. The city employees currently participate in the Utah State Retirement System. And this is a pension and or a 401k, depending on which program they have chosen to be a part of. And it also depends on when they entered the retirement system. So in addition to that, currently the city provides an additional 3% match into the 401k if the employee contributes 3%. So previous to this, before the recession, the city also provided an automatic 3% 401k. So the city's total contribution was 6% with a 3% match from the employee. That was prior to 2008. So the way things are currently is the Utah State Retirement System and then the 401k match at 3%. So as we have been talking about possibly reinstating that previous benefit, I made a mistake, I guess, of including the word match in some of my reports and presentations to where the automatic 3% was discussed as being also a match. So the proposal that we thought we were talking about was reinstating the previous benefit, which is a 3% automatic contribution. So we're not necessarily, I guess, advocating, but I wanted to try to clarify what was in our minds and what was happening in the past and what the proposal in the current budget is. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on the retirement benefit so far? Okay.
I just, on the 401k, the 3% that we're talking about possibly having the city put in automatically, when does that start? Is it 90 days after employee, or when would that start? Or does it start immediately? And then my next question would be, what is the total amount? Do you know that off the top of your head, what that 3% would be? I've heard some numbers, and I just want to know if it's...
The way we have our contract with IIMC is that 3% match that we have now, if the employee can put it in right away at the start, and then the city puts in their 3%. That's how it's set up right now. But the employee has to be vested for right now 5 complete years before. So if they left before 5 complete years, they could not get any money that the city put in. They could only withdraw their money that they put in.
Okay.
So that's.
And then I can answer the other question. In the general fund, the total cost for the additional 3% is about $83,000.
That's what I remember. Actually, I thought it was about 90, so.
That's what I thought, 89, but 83 sounds better.
So that shows up here on the slide as well. So we've talked, in our meetings, we've talked about these budget options, and we've kind of gone back and forth about which ones or which options are a higher priority than other options. So I've put them all here on this slide to remind us what the options are that we have been discussing. We've talked about a new code enforcement community resource officer in the police department. That total cost for a full-time position is $73,000. A part-time position would be $26,000. And then we've talked about an events coordinator position in the Parks Department. Full-time would be $79,000. Part-time would be $28,000. And then we've talked about an increase to the 401k contribution. And those amounts would be about $83,000 for 3%, $55,000 for 2%, $27,000 for 1%. And so these numbers that we're showing you just pertain to the general fund. So there would be additional 401k expenses in the utility funds related to the 401k as well. So go to the next slide, please. So in the budget that was included in the council packet, this was based on the direction that we received at our last council discussion. We included a part-time code enforcement officer, a full-time events coordinator, and the additional 3% to the 401k. So the total cost of those three options is shown there at the bottom, $188,000. And we have been able to balance the general fund budget with those options included. John, can you go to the next slide? So since the last meeting and since the packet was prepared, I had a request from one council member to look at this option, which is to fund the code enforcement full-time, the events coordinator full-time, and then an additional 1% in the 401k. So that's how the numbers look. If we include those three budget options, it's $180,000. So it's a little bit less expensive, but close to a wash when you compare those options. So both of those are there. Would like to receive your input on these options so that we can know where we're going from here. So we'll, I guess, open up the floor.
And don't forget, Councilmember, the department heads are here. I strongly encourage each of them to make up their own mind and share it with you so that you have all the options. So, question them or, talk about it as you will.
Can we hear from the department heads before we chime in? Mayor,
Sure.
get their opinion?
I'd like to hear from Chief Quinney since it looks like it affects him the most, whether you get it full-time or part-time.
And he dressed up just for this meeting.
Just for Ryan, too.
Well, I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Mayor and Council. I do have an opinion, and one of our residents stole my speech, so. It's true that our costs go up every year, and unless the consumer absorbs those costs, then we gotta find another way to deal with them. And in my mind, if we're not paying our employees market value or compensating them in a market value, which could include benefits, they're the ones paying for it. And I don't believe that's fair and equitable and ethical. So with these options that you've presented, we could provide the code enforcement service with the part-time employee. The rest of that full-time was a community resource officer, which I felt we could utilize for walk-in service, scout presentations, a number of other non-criminal things that take our law enforcement officers off the streets. But we could absorb that for another year or two. And I think it's important that we make sure it's not our employees paying for those additional costs. And whether we find another way to increase revenue or lower the service we provide, whatever we got to do, it should not be the employees that pay for that. And that's how I feel about it. So,
Chief, I just, quick question, and Mr. Hamblin brought it up, and we kind of have an idea, but what does it cost to replace? You have somebody leave. What do you think it costs us as a city?
well, it depends on the study that you look at, but when you start considering, our last 2 hires have been uncertifiables, which means they have not been to the police academy. So, and that's just the market we're in right now. They're both going to be good officers, and they're just finishing up the academy. But we're talking 6 months of school, so that's a salary we're paying them, as well as their equipment to do it, and then up to 3 months of field training, which is also their salary and their trainer's salary. So we could be looking at $100,000 easily. I've heard higher numbers, but I don't have anything, to give you an exact figure.
Okay. But that, what we need to hear, thank you.
Chief, you mentioned the employees paying for it. If we were to not give the additional 3% that they're not getting now, how would they be paying for it?
Well, if their market value is X number of dollars, and that 3% in a benefit form is part of that,
Right?
and we take that, then we're not paying them at market. So whether we get them up to market in 100% salaries,
Right.
that's still, we're at least getting their compensation up to market value.
Right.
If it's part salary, part, a contribution to a 401 is cheaper for the city, because there's no taxes paid on it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Your suggestion in regard to the part-time versus the full-time resource officer in lieu of the 3%, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
3% with the part-time would be my preference.
So that's this option.
The first one.
Yeah.
And that 3% before my time, and I've been around 23 years with North Ogden City, was given to the employees in lieu of a raise 1 year. And probably because it was beneficial for the city, because it did save them, a certain percentage in tax dollars. And those of us that were here before 2008, it was part of our compensation package. And so when it was taken away, it essentially was taking that raise away. So obviously, people who have started since then, it was never part of their compensation package. So this would be a benefit on top.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Any others you want to hear from?
I'd like to hear from all of them.
Okay. Dave?
Rock, paper, scissors, who goes first?
Name and address, please. No.
So this one's a tough one for me because, I do have some general fund employees, but overall mine aren't. And I don't have employees up for here. So that's my hardest thing with this one is, if I'm in support of what Chief and Tiffany, if they said that we think we need the guy, a full-time guy in lieu of the benefits, then I would support them. But I support what Chief is saying. It's one of those things that, to go from a full-time to a part-time and provide that 3% to 80 employees, I think that's a great benefit that the city can do. And, he spoke to, it's something that we're helping the city by not doing it all in pay and using some of it in benefits to help the city with taxes. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I'm very just supportive of what their thoughts are.
So Dave, just, is your figures about the same to replace an employee, or is that kind of what you'd think too?
Yeah, maybe not as much as the Chiefs, but I mean, you're in that $50 to $80 to $100,000 range. I mean,
Depends on who and position, everything, and experience, I understand that, so.
Absolutely.
And one benefit Dave's crew has is they typically have to work in pairs. Like if they're doing any sort of actual work, they need to have someone there for
safety reasons.
standards. So it's not as detrimental as the police, where most of our officers work by themselves. Although there's other officers in the city, but they're in separate cars.
Yeah, ours is more of it starts to become a quality issue if somebody that's supposed to be, that's supposed to be here for many years, is supposed to be the one training, is now only a 1 or 2 year employee is trying to train somebody younger than him, then we're probably not getting all the knowledge that we could be getting. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Tiffany, we'll give you the last word.
Well, like Dave said, I'm here. I'm in support of Chief Quinney and what he's mentioned to you. And I also want to thank him for his teamwork. A lot of the times our department brings employees to the table or requests to the table, and we have to table that and wait a year or 2 years in lieu of other things. And so I really appreciate that, because I do feel like a full-time events coordinator is what's needed in the city to be able to fill in what was missing from years ago, and also to be able to handle the workload, and so that we can get the quality of employee that we're looking for. So I really appreciate his teamwork and being willing to wait on that employee if it's something that will work for his department, and to make that work with 3% for all of the employees, I think would be really great for our city.
Thank you. I would just say this much, council, and I'll throw in my 2 bits. As I visited with other mayors in our meetings down in St. George and other options where I meet with other mayors, we're very fortunate in having the skill level that we have here in North Ogden with our employees. You see what happened to Sandy when they had employees that didn't do their job. It's going to cost the city of Sandy millions of dollars in lawsuits over that fluoride issue. You look at Morgan up there, they had a tank that had the lock broken on it for a number of months because they didn't go check it. Our guys are checking it 2 or 3 times a week. We have well-trained employees in our city, and we want to keep them, and some of them are underpaid. According to the study that we just made regarding the labor market. And so I'm totally supportive of the great employees we have here, and we make sure that we take care of them properly. They've saved us thousands and thousands of dollars with their skill levels. We had to build a building over there because the EPA required that we have our garbage cans under roof. It would have cost us, I can't remember how many thousands of dollars to have a contractor build it. Our employees build it for peanuts, basically. Saved the city thousands and thousands of dollars. So as I look over all of that and look over what other cities are having at this time and the difficulties that they have, we're very fortunate to have the skill level and the people trained here to have water come out of our taps, have the sewer work, has the storm system work, all these different things. When you ride around with those people, you know they know their stuff. And so I'm totally supportive of what we're proposing here.
Mayor?
Sure.
I agree with everything that's been said, and appreciate, Chief, for your your willingness and looking out for your employees too. And also I do feel like we do need a full-time events coordinator. So to me, sounds like it's a no-brainer.
Sorry, I hate to cut you off, but I don't want to ignore, Evan is a department head as well and hasn't provided an opinion if he wants to give one.
That's true, sorry.
But I also, I just don't want to ignore him because he's not with the three in the back. Sorry, Councilman Stoker.
It's okay.
Councilwoman.
Well, with that introduction, thank you, John.
Thanks for catching that.
I don't disagree with the things that have been said. My job is to watch over the city finances, and so a lot of my time is looking at numbers and trends, and I'm in favor of compensating employees what they should be compensated. Our budget this year shifts heavily toward personnel expenses, and I think for any finance person, that sort of shift hits some nerves, because personnel expenses it's a commitment that the city's making. This is a long-term commitment that we're making, and when we make long-term commitments like that, we should think seriously about them. The economy that we are living in right now has been really a great economy for many years. And we tend in good economies to become comfortable and to expand services, to increase expenditures. We're also a growing city, so that should be factored into the thought process that as the city grows, you do need to expand services and numbers of employees. So I offer support for the idea of making sure that employees are well paid, but I also offer a caution that things won't be this good forever. So there inevitably will be downturns in the economy, and so I'm not really offering an alternative solution, but I just want to voice the reality that personnel costs don't go away, and they don't usually shrink either, unless it's something serious that we do where we have to eliminate positions or those sorts of things. So I don't mean to be the downer on the positive, because I think what has been said is really valid, but I also just want to make sure we're thinking about that other reality too, that when we hire an employee, we want to be able to keep that job indefinitely and that service. And when we add benefits to city employees, we want to not have to come back in 3 years and say, sorry, we can't afford that anymore. So just some thoughts to think about, and maybe to balance out the conversation.
Annette is also a department head. She apparently wants to pound the podium.
Yeah. I need to see your faces. I agree with what's been said. I was here during the recession. I saw every department head leave, but me, I was the diehard. I saw 8 people leave from Public Works, 6 from the police department. This isn't including the department heads that left. What it cost the city to get those people back and to keep them is well worth the expense. And at some point, we are going to have to raise taxes. I live in North Ogden. I understand that. Because people want services. And they, like everyone says, they want their water. When they turn their water faucet on, they want water. When they flush their toilet, they want to make sure it's out of their house. There's just some things, and the cost of having all those things is going up. we take on those costs. The cost of pipes, the expense of them is going up. You've seen this cost of houses skyrocketing. A lot of that is the lumber and all the things that go into it. Carl, you're aware of that. and things go up. There is a point when the council needs to think about raising taxes. And we need to also think about what happens when we aren't taking care of the employees. I've just seen so much of it, and here at the city that it's hard to lose good employees. It's really hard. And the cost to train them and the time it takes for those people to train them that are there, and the amount of work that isn't getting done, because that is happening. And so, I mean, it's a balance of what we do. And it's not that I don't agree with Evan, because those costs are always going to be there. I was here when we laid people off also. And I was the one doing the layoff. It's hard. It's hard to do that. And anyway, I just some things for you to think about. But I agree with everyone else, what's been said.
Did you have a comment, Ryan?
Yeah. I working at the fire department. We actually have this 3% benefit already, which we kind of maybe stole from North Ogden when we were part of North Ogden. So and talking with Chief Wade and Chief Rohr before him, they always had the mentality: you take away a benefit or take away something away, it's almost difficult to get back. Which we've noticed. We took this away 10 years ago, saying we'll get it back when the economy gets better, and now it's better, and it's still hard to put it back in. So my recommendation is put it back in and leave it there and not take it away. I did some quick math when Chief was talking. How much does an average police officer make a year? 30,000 is a cheap end.
Starting?
Yeah, probably 40. So 3% per year, that's only like $1,200 a year for that one officer. For over 12 years, that's $12,000 we've just taken away from that officer for the last 10 years. It doesn't affect him, his paycheck every month or every week that he's getting it, but his retirement's now affected. So we just took $12,000 away from an officer, which I'm sure they could have used. So I think it's vital that it's there. And we've also looked at, when we do hiring, it's almost like a competition of what's one city offering over another. If we can show we're offering a 3% match, or not match, 3% guarantee, that's one more thing that might bring somebody here.
Okay. Councilman Turner?
So the key word that I heard from Evan, and maybe I heard it wrong, is that with this, the general fund balance is balanced. It's with what we're proposed. I'm still concerned because I think when we first started this budget, we had to come up or cut 300,000 or something right around there, if I remember right.
600.
Was it 600,000? I can't remember. It is.
Additions.
So right now the general fund is balanced with this. We still got the other funds that we need to look at and see what we got to cut there. And
They're all balanced.
They're all balanced too. You know, I mean, for me, that's the key word for me, that we've got it balanced without raising taxes. And I'll be honest with you, I'm in agreement with Mr. Hamblin when he said that I live in North Ogden, obviously, and I'm not excited about raising taxes, but I'm not opposed to it either. So, but with that being said, that was the key thing for me, was that this was balanced, because 2 months ago it was a $600,000 deficit or whatever it was. So I mean, I feel much better. Thank you for your work, and department heads for working it out, figuring it out, so we didn't have to do all the figuring.
Yeah, I think the department heads and staff has done a great job in making the necessary adjustments in their budgets and so forth so that we can erase that deficit. They've done a great job. Cheryl, did you have additional before you got cut off before?
That's okay. Phil can say, I was going to say too.
let me preface my words with, I think the department heads know how much I support our employees from top to bottom. Every department, I've supported every raise, the equipment that are necessary, to hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 6.5 years. It's probably more than that, probably close to 600,000 or 700,000 with all of the raises, market adjustments that we've done, and all of those things. After our last meeting, as I did some digging to find out more about this and realized that since 2008, we have had a 401k match at 3%, and that we would be adding an additional guaranteed. I had some heartburn over that, not because I don't love our employees, but because it feels excessive for any employee. I know of very few people in any market that have a guaranteed 3% from their employer and then get an additional 3% on top of the 3% that they generate themselves. What it came down to for me, as I spoke with each of you individually and have asked Evan to provide some of these numbers, is that and the person that came to mind is Mrs. Scothern, single lady, elderly lady, husband passed away a few years ago. I think she's in her 80s, and she's often watching, so if she is, hi, Mrs. Scothern, lives across from the dog park. I was thinking, how do I defend a benefit that to me and to many will feel excessive to someone who's on a fixed income? A benefit that, while we don't have to raise taxes this year, certainly pushes us ever closer to that fine line where eventually taxes are going to have to go up. They can't sit idle for 15, 20, 30 years. I think the previous tax increase before that, John, it was in 98?
2003.
2003.
Right.
Okay.
Annette says yes.
Okay, 2003. So in a 16-year period of time, we've had 2 tax increases, one and this one not in almost 15 years. Did I do my math right? Yeah, that's right. The reality is taxes will have to go up someday, and I support it. I realize that's just an inevitability of where we are, but I can't justify raising taxes for what in my heart feels like an excessive benefit, a benefit that's a guarantee, a benefit that few other cities get, and certainly a benefit that is not found in the private market. As much as I love our employees and would give them the shirt off of my back, I can't give them the shirt off of all the other residents' back. So, in a nutshell, my position is, Chief, if you're okay with a part-time person, I think that's great. And I appreciate your, as Tiffany said, your willingness to assist with the thing. I just can't, in good conscience, agree to a 3% guarantee across the board. And I could explain and give reasons why all night long, but I just can't go there. I am willing and happy to increase the discretionary 401k match to 4.5% to match closer what a traditional 401k match would be. But I just can't do the 3%. I just can't. That's just where I fall on this particular issue. Sorry, guys. Love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. Maybe. Sorry, Mayor.
Any other comments from the council? Well, Evan, as we've discussed the 401k here, it appears from the discussion that everybody's pretty much for it except for Councilman Swanson.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we have a motion on this,
We don't,
on or,
I don't think we have a motion, it just direction on where to bring it back for the budget for the final, for the.
Yeah, so the hope is getting enough of an indication that we don't get a surprise in June when we go to adopt the final budget. So if most of the council, Blake, Councilman Severing's not here, you can do a motion and pass it. It wouldn't be a resolution or an ordinance. Or you can kind of proceed in that direction, understanding that the final vote will come in part by the tentative budget, because that can be discussed again when that's accepted. And then the final budget is the final one.
Mayor?
yes.
In years past, we had a council member who voted no to the entire budget because that council member was not happy with a particular item in the budget. And I don't think we need to do that. I'd rather we just vote on this individual item, and I will go with the vote, so that it's not an issue and not hanging out there. It is what the council has decided. That I think most of you that were here remember when that happened, and for me, I'd just rather vote on the individual item, and then we can, when it comes time for the tentative and final budget, then council's made its decision, and we can go from there.
So if that's the case, if we'd need someone to present a motion that we would then be voted on. So.
Well, you had a comment, Ryan, you kept raising your hand.
Yeah. I mentioned this to Phil yesterday. Another reason I'm for this 3% guarantee. I read an article yesterday that said the average private sector contribution to a 401k throughout the U.S. is 4 to 5%. So we're not even at average yet.
Right.
So if we do a 3% guarantee, my hope would be that employees would still contribute more, but if we're helping them out.
Okay.
Well, we'd still only
Right.
match to 3%.
Right, we'd still only match, but
Right.
we're giving them, theoretically, I won't get, but we're still not at the or national average, even at 3%. I don't mind supporting Councilman Swanson's position of making it a match, but I'd like more than 4%, at least 5 or 6. That's my position.
Councilwoman Stoker, did you have a?
Well, I was just going to say that I was around in the council when during that time the morale was really low when we lost all of those employees. And I mean, it was really hard to watch good employees go because they weren't getting, not only was their pay low, but the benefits had been taken away. So I really do think we have to protect our employees, and if it's in with the 401k, it's like if we're going to do it, we need to do it at least with what Ryan said, and not. At least it would take it up to the national average. Without the match, it just would take it up to at least that part. I think we need to do something. I know we have to do something, not think. I want to do something.
Any other questions or discussion? Yes.
Well, as I'm thinking here and listening to my fellow council members, as I mentioned as I spoke, I'm okay with going to 4.5%, even 5%, because it's a true match.
Right.
Right? So in order to get the 5%, you have to contribute 5%. I don't see the 3% guarantee as an incentive to save more because you get it whether you do anything or not. Right? If you contribute 0 to your 401k, you get 3%.
Right.
If you contribute 10%, you get 3%. And so if in the thought of encouraging increased savings, bringing us closer to that, and I appreciate you sharing those articles with me, that national average, 4.5%, 5%, I think 6 is too much, but I'd be willing to do that and make it a true match, expand the true match, do away and not have a guaranteed, but expand that true match so that we're encouraging additional savings by matching those additional savings. My company, I mean, we're a $500 million a year company nationally, and we only get 3% if we get 3%. That's a good year for us. Some years we get 1%, just depends on how things are with the company. So, somebody make a motion?
I was just gonna say, the key for me was it balanced out. So that was my key, and so I was fine with the way this is because it balanced, so. And as far as the match, I mean, if it's a true match and they put in 5%, I know that, I think there's some maximum you can put in a match or something. I don't know what all the rules are there, I kind of, in a way, it enables and forces you to put more money into your 401k, so actually it becomes a better benefit anyway, because you're putting in 5%, so you get 5%, you know what I mean? So, so I kind of like that idea, but I'm not opposed, the way it is shows this right here, I'm not opposed to that because it balanced. So,
I like it too. It's balanced.
yeah, that was the big key for me.
Why are you gonna make a motion?
Do our department heads have anything about a match? Any say?
Match versus a guarantee?
I do have one thing. It's not that I have a preference one way or the other. It's not that I have a preference one way or the other. But the biggest thing is, as far as a budget impact, it's not much different. So if you picking 5% match versus 5%, we still have to budget for that everybody in our departments are going to do it. So as far as a budgetary thing, it's not much of a difference. I mean, it's almost going to look the exact same if you do it 5%, 5%. I just wanted to let you guys know that we have to budget and assume that every single employee is going to take a 5% match. So we have to budget that way. So,
Right, but the employee would have to pony up and save more. It's just not a guaranteed, it's not just money handed to them.
no, and I completely understand that. I just wanted you guys to understand that.
Oh, yeah, understood.
As a budgetary thing, it looks the exact same
Sure.
as this is going to look. So.
Sure.
Any comments from Chief or Tiffany? Annette or Evan?
I would just say if you make a motion, it would be a motion to tell us what to put in the tentative budget.
Okay, council, you're on the spot.
All right, I'll make that motion then. I'll make a motion, we approve the 3% guarantee into the budget for the 401k in the tentative budget as presented on that slide. Can that be Exhibit A? No.
There's been a motion by Councilman Barker.
I'll second that.
Have a second by Councilman Turner. We'll begin the voting with, is there any other discussion? We'll begin the voting then with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Love you guys. No.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
I love you guys, and yes.
Motion passes.
Suck up.
Okay, Evan, you have your direction there.
Okay. Very good. We'll move on to the next. Right there, yeah. So, in the original general fund budget that we brought to the city council, we had included $60,000 to update the zoning ordinance. This is something that the planning department has been wanting to do for several years, and we have not funded it for them yet. They tried to get some grants to pay for it, I think twice, and that didn't work out. So we had included the $60,000 in the operational budget along with the other budget proposals. And it was one of the first things to go as we were trying to balance the budget. But as we talked about, this is really a one-time sort of project. I mean, we have to update our ordinances occasionally throughout the decades, I guess, but This is not an ongoing every year expense. So because of that, we felt like it would make sense if the council supports the proposal that we could use fund balance in the general fund to pay for this. And that way, it wouldn't take away from the other budget proposals that we've been discussing. So we've included this in the budget that was in the council packets, and it would just be utilizing $60,000 in general fund balance to pay for this zoning ordinance update. So in doing this, the general fund, the fund balance in the general fund is money that is not restricted. It can be used on all sorts of things. So when we're saying 60,000 to the zoning ordinance, you might think to yourself, well, that money could go toward a police station, it could go toward park improvements, it could go toward roads. There are many things that it could go toward. But we've included it to go toward the zoning ordinance update just because it's been something that the planning department has been anxious about. So we wanted to put that in there and see what your thoughts are about that.
Can I add something from staff perspective? So the last time our zoning ordinance was completely rewritten was 2002. And since then, we have probably done, I would say conservatively, 100 amendments to it. And what that happens is it just, if you kind of imagine one of those, I call them goat head plants that just kind of like sprawl and move. And if you've ever pulled up a really big one that's, 10 feet wide, we just need to pare it back and streamline it again. And that's kind of the purpose of it. Our actual ordinance, some sections of our actual ordinance are 30 plus years old. This wouldn't be going to fix those, but it would be fixing the zoning one. A good example of the other ordinance is it's a nuisance violation to dip your sheep in the river. I think I've told you that before. So anyways, but this would help streamline and it would look at like we talked about that 5-sided lot ordinance. It would look at all of those again and reevaluate. Most of the ordinance would just get transferred over, just reformatted, reorganized, but it'd be the same language that's already there. So it's not going to change everything, but there might be a few that they'd kind of look at and say, oh, this doesn't comply with this new state ordinance that passed this year or things like that. So, yeah.
Ms. Wilson?
Evan, what is our general fund balance for the benefit of the public? What's our general fund balance right now?
Give me just a second, I'll find that. So we're estimating at the end of the current fiscal year that our general fund balance will be 1.9 million.
Okay, thank you. I fully support this. I think we need to have it done. John, what would it cost for us to catch up our 30-year ordinances that are not zoning? About the same?
It might cost another on top of it, another 60, because they're typically the zoning and subdivision ordinances are about the same size as everything else combined.
Okay.
So that's about what it would be. It actually might be a little cheaper because a lot of it's just going through and scrubbing out the ordinances that are outdated. But there would probably be a lot of work done in the nuisance section. We've talked about that several times as a council, as well as Public Works.
We've talked about this numerous times since I've been on the council, and I think it would be worth money well spent to not only do the zoning ordinance update, but to do the general ordinance update too, and take that from general fund up to 120,000. We have 1.9 million sitting there. I think this would be I like the analogy that John gave, and I think it benefits our residents so that Julie will quit dipping her sheep. Well, actually, we would remove that, and it would allow you to. So there you go.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe still get.
But so that would be my proposal, that we double that and we do it across the board.
And we can reach out to other cities to see what they've seen as an experience, as well as there are you know, there are some people who I think are, I hate to say they're just hitting the consultant market, but there's a fairly prominent planner from Salt Lake who's retiring this year, and this might be the type of project they'd be able to take on, and we might get it for less than 120 to do the whole ordinance if it was something they wanted to do. So,
Councilman Turner?
So where'd we come up with the $60,000 number?
that was Rob's estimate from what he's seen other cities do.
So what I would like to, I'm not opposed to doing all the ordinances or anything, but I think we need to set it as a not to exceed, and set it as and then put out as a RFP to get it. So like you said, we could get it for less. My concern is that we say 60,000 and it comes back as 80, then we were stupid with that. I think we need to. I mean, if we're going to have a budget there, we put a budget there, but we need to have it not to exceed, and then go see how much it. I mean, it'd be nice to know what it's going to cost now before we even set the budget, but that probably won't be able to happen by the time we put the RFP and get all the answers back and everything.
But the contract would come to the council for approval, just because of the type of project it is. We would want the council to engage with the consultant, whoever's hired, in a similar way, because they'll need feedback from the council on, here's some areas of concern, where do you want us to focus our efforts?
Any other discussion on this item? It appears that the council's in favor of moving that forward.
Would the council like me to include the 120,000?
I would like that, and I agree with Carl that it ought to be a not to exceed. And then we get the actual, the RFPs back and see where we are, and then make final decisions from there.
Okay. The last thing on the slide there is, I just put multi-year. I wasn't sure how long a project like this would take, if we would be able to complete it all in 1 year, or if it would take longer than that. Do you know, John?
So I was involved in one of these for South Salt Lake, and it took them about 18 months, but their ordinance was probably about twice the size of ours, their zoning. And so I think if the right consultant started in July, it would be done in a year.
That's how long it took to do the
So-
last one.
So it took a
It was-
year.
It was just a little under a year.
So Annette said it took that much.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think in our contract, we'd want to set an end deadline, because we would have them give us a fixed price anyways. We wouldn't be doing it hourly, and have them essentially locked in on a price and a deadline so that we get it done and it doesn't drag on.
Okay, so we'll add we'll add an additional 60 to the 60 that's already in there, for a total of 120, and that will be included in the tentative budget. Okay, the next slide. When we had our first budget retreat, we spent a lot of time talking about the list of capital projects and the budget for the capital projects fund. One of those major projects is the widening of 450 East Washington Boulevard, expanding the intersection. And so we have a substantial amount of money budgeted for that. Some of the funding for that project is coming through UDOT, so it's not all going to flow through the city books, but we do have portions that we will pay for. And on our end, the project will be transacted in the capital improvement fund. We have these other 4 transportation funds that are separate from the capital improvement fund. And they're separate because the funds in each one is from a different source, and we have restrictions on how these funds are used. So there's a budget for each of these funds included in the packet, but this is just a brief summary. We're proposing that $1.1 million of the transportation utility fund be transferred to go. So I'm sorry, all of these are going toward this intersection and road widening project. So the transportation utility fund is funded through the $3 per month utility fee. So that 1.1 million would go in. The 1.6 million from the transportation impact fee fund would go to the same project, and then 816,000 from the transportation sales tax fund. All of that would go toward the road widening project. The 400-450 East Improvement Fund was set up when the city purchased homes along 400-450 East, and the city has been renting out those properties until the time comes that we're ready to actually expand the road. And those, I don't know if the homes will all be demolished. I think some of them will be. They will be. Okay.
Yeah, they all will be. The road will be within a couple feet of the walls of the buildings.
So once that happens, then the city, I guess, will sell the remaining property. But the money that this is generating is going to go toward the same road widening project. So we have that fund set up. We're not budgeting in fiscal year 2020 to spend any of that money on the project yet. 30,000 is budgeted for property maintenance and repair as we're operating this rental business, and then 77,000 is being reserved for the future road project.
And just as a point of clarification, so with quarter preservation funds that WACOG gives us, that's what we use to buy these properties. And our commitment to them was, if we're renting homes, then we use the rental to go back into keeping the properties maintained or for the project. That kind of came up because as soon as, under Utah law, as soon as you designate how wide the road is going to be and the path it's going to take, you've effectively condemned the homes. So we went to all the people between 3,100 and 2,600 and said, your house is going to be in the way of this expansion someday. If you want us to buy it now, we'll buy it. If you don't want to sell it now, we're not going to force you to sell it. And so we have one person who just said, I'm going to stay where I'm at. But we have 7 or 8 others that said, no, we'll sell now. And we still have one more we need to work with, but the road design is affecting whether they'll possibly just move their house, the Parley Bates house or the Crozet home. But we haven't got the final design yet to go out and sit down with them and say, here's the options, what do you prefer yet? But just so you know, it's not like we've spent, I don't want to say it's free money because we did put in a match. About 600,000 of the 3 million is city transportation funds, but the majority of it is the WACOG transportation funds that we pay through our transportation, our gasoline taxes that go to Weber County.
Mayor, just for clarification, obviously the impact fee fund comes from impact fees, correct? And the transportation sales tax fund, that's our B&C funds?
No.
Where does that come from?
It comes from retail sales.
Retail sales.
There was a
okay.
county option.
Well, it's not a separate tax that we have here in North Ogden. It comes from the retail sales.
It's the Prop 1 money. Was it Prop 1 from a couple years ago when UTA get half of it?
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're quite fortunate to have these different revenue sources that are all specific to roads, and Mayor Taylor set up the Transportation Utility Fund, which now we've got over $1 million that we can put toward the road project. So I think there's been some good planning and a good effort to set aside these funds so that we can do this major project. Should we move on?
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, proceed.
Okay. The next slide, we're going to talk about utility rates. So whenever we make changes to the budget, it has a trickle effect and utility rates are adjusted. But these are the proposed utility rates that are associated with the budget that was included in the packet. The total is $2.86 per month. That's the total increase that is being proposed across the funds. We've already gone over these funds. I wanted to talk about a couple of changes that we've made since we talked about it before. First of all, the Stormwater Fund, when we talked about that in our council meeting, we later discovered that there was an error in the spreadsheet, and so we've corrected that. I mentioned in that meeting that our asset repair and replacement was funded at $346,000, which was a mistake, and so I've made an adjustment to that in the spreadsheet and proposed a 45-cent rate increase in the storm fund to go toward asset repair and replacement. If we do that rate increase, then it brings our repair and replacement amount up to $250,000 per year. That doesn't fully fund depreciation. I think about $300,000 would get us to fully fund depreciation under the accounting rules, but it's at least a step in the right direction to be able to do that. So that's what's in the current version of the budget. Also, the water and sewer rates are a little bit lower than what we talked about before, and part of the reason for this is that we've actually, I think in order to explain this one, I'll go to the next slide, John. Okay, so as we've reviewed utility rates each year in connection with the budget, we have typically proposed increases to the base rates of these various utility rates. And this chart in the slide shows customer A, who has a typical bill of $25. Customer B has a typical bill of $150. So if we increase the base rate on both of those customers, that ends up being a 25% increase on customer A and only a 4% increase on customer B. So customer B could represent a business. It could be a resident, but typically business utility bills are higher than residential. And so over the course of time, if we only increase the base rates, then it's putting a greater share of the burden on residential users. So we're proposing an increase on the base rate, but we're also proposing that we look at the rates on businesses and non-residential customers, which would include churches, schools, government buildings, and those sorts of things. Let's go to the next slide, John. So before I go over these, I'll mention that in the budget, in the packet, we have included $25,000 in the water fund that would be generated by rate increases that are not to the base rate. So it would be these other ways of increasing utility rates. And then we've included $15,000 in the sewer fund. So here are three considerations that we've talked about. We don't have a perfected recommendation yet. We're still trying to evaluate some pricing and estimate some revenues, but we want to explain kind of the thought behind these and get your input and see if you feel like this is a direction we should pursue. So first of all is the idea of adding a tiered base water rate based on meter size. So in the city we have, let's go to the next slide, John. Okay, so this table shows the various meter sizes that we have in the city from 1 inch up to 8 inches. I think we do have some 3/4 inches, but we don't install those anymore. And there's the next column that shows the estimated cost of replacing those meters. Those are very round numbers, and Dave and his team are looking into what those actual costs are right now. When somebody's water meter needs to be replaced, the water fund pays for that, and it's supposed to be built into the monthly water rates that they pay. So you can see a significant difference in the cost of replacing water meters from the 1 inch all the way up to the 8 inch. And so the idea behind this is that water customers who have a larger water meter would pay a higher base rate, so that when their meter needs to be replaced, they would have paid their fair share of that. And replacing the water meter, at a large grocery store, for example, would not be borne by the regular residential ratepayers. So this table attempts to separate out the meter portion of the base rate from the rest of the base rate. $13.30 was calculated as the non-meter portion of the base rate. And then we did a 15-year life estimate on these meters. And so let's see I guess the third column over is the monthly expense amount that we would recognize if the cost of the meter is depreciated over 15 years. So somebody that has an 8-inch meter ends up with a $64.35 per month base rate, and then the usage rate would be on top of that. So this is the idea, this is the concept. The numbers aren't exact, but we wanted to let you see this and understand this, and tell us if you feel like this is a good approach to take, or if you have any questions about it.
So council, if you look at the 8-inch meter, we do have one of those in the city. In 20 years, if they continue paying what they're currently paying now, which is a base rate of about $24 a month or $25, technically the other users in the system are subsidizing the depreciation on that meter by $25 a month. So what Evan's proposing is the base rate tied to the meter, so that we're covering that depreciation and wear out, so that each of you as a single family homeowner isn't helping cover the cost of an 8-inch meter for a different user. So it's a little bit of an simplification, but that's what the goal is.
Do we typically it seems like we had this conversation on churches and government owned and schools. Are their utility rates less? Or it seemed like we had this discussion. I don't remember what the outcome was off the top of my head.
So everybody who isn't a residential user pays a flat per 1,000 gallon rate, and their meter, it doesn't increase. So they all pay a standard this much per month plus this much per 1,000 gallons. The residences in the past, we have encouraged conservation, and so as they do more and more thousands of gallons of water a month, the next 1,000 gallons costs incrementally more. It gets up to as high as $3 more than the first 1,000 gallons cost them. So the first 1,000 gallons costs them $1.62 a 1,000, and by the time they hit the highest tier, it's $4.62 a 1,000 gallons. So it compounds quite heavily for people who are high users. And so what we've talked about is just treating everyone the same and saying we're going to charge the same rate to commercial and residential users, and it would include churches and schools and other nonprofit type entities, including for-profit. So basically everyone pays the same regardless of what they are doing inside the building.
Okay, this is kind of off the wall question, I guess, but what about, do we have temporary meters that we issue?
Kind of. So what we do for construction is we give them a jumper that goes in where their meter goes, and they have water to provide their construction, but they pay a flat fee per month. That's just kind of an estimate of what their impact is on the system. And everyone pays the same amount, right, Dave? So there's not a meter installed, but they have water while they're there. But because there's not someone to sign up for the utility account and start paying the monthly fee, we just make the contractor pay it as part of their building permit.
Okay. I think there's a better way to do it, but we can talk about that later. And Dave, what?
Councilman Wilson?
I like this. I like the idea of the bigger users paying more to pay for their more expensive equipment and not being subsidized by, in reality, the homeowners. I like that, and I think what we're going to be talking about is the tiered utility rate being, water per 1,000 gallon being tiered for all entities as well, and no longer the flat for businesses. Right. I support both of them.
We can go into a little more detail on, right here on this slide, it shows a possible way of modifying our tiered rates. On the left is the current tiered rates, but this only applies to residential customers. Non-residential users pay the lowest rate, $1.62 per thousand, regardless of the amount of usage. Those non-residential customers do pay a higher base rate currently. Their base rate is about double what the residential base rate is. So it's a little bit of give and take, but for a non-residential user that uses a lot of water, they're paying far less per gallon than a residential user. And as we talked about this week, we felt like it made sense to us that all water users should pay the same rates. And so we've put together this proposed tier that would apply to everyone. We eliminated the highest tier so that the impact wouldn't be as great on the higher users, but there would still be a significant impact on high non-residential users if we were to adopt this. So consideration number one was to change base rates based on meter size. Consideration number two is to put everybody on the same system, the same program, and that everybody would pay based on this table or a similar table. We obviously can adjust those rates if we feel like it makes more sense to do that. Any questions on that consideration or direction? Does everybody agree with what Phil said?
You know how I feel. While they're pondering, did we, I don't remember doing it, but we may have, implemented a tiered base rate going up the hill? We did implement that. Okay, so
It's 6 cents a gallon or 1,000 gallons for pumping rates. Does that sound?
That's the first tier. The second one's like 11.
Okay.
So
the higher up the hill, the more expensive it is to get the water up there, the more you're going to pay.
Yeah, so there's a general area, and then there's the first tier, which we only have to pump water the one time, and then the second one is where we have to pump it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So I have the numbers here, 19 cents per thousand and then 27 cents per thousand.
Okay. To cover the cost of getting the water up there. Yeah, okay.
Any other direction for Evan?
So Evan, this second proposed rate, does, where it makes everybody paying the same non-residents and residential, does that also include the businesses and schools and churches too?
Yeah, the main, it's tricky when we talk about this because we say non-residential, but we don't mean non-resident. So when we say non-residential, we're talking about churches, schools, businesses, governments,
Anything that's not a home.
anything that's not a home. And, the logic is that everybody uses the water and everybody should pay under a fair system, I guess. I don't know exactly what the logic was to have businesses pay a lesser rate, or to have them pay a higher base rate. Maybe there's an argument for that if we're trying to be business friendly or something. I don't know, but this system would bring it under a more equitable program, I guess.
So the whole idea with the tiered rate was that the whole thing was based on conservation. And when they were looking at it, they said, businesses are only going to use what they're going to use. They're not going to conserve water to save a little bit of money if they need that much water to use in a dentist office or those kind of things. So when we did the tiered rate, that was completely based on conservation. But and then I just wanted to add that this proposed rate that Evan's talking about, where we're kind of simplifying it. Me and Stacy, we ran, I think, about 20 accounts. And as far as the residential houses, it really didn't change. What we're looking at in normal single-family home, we're not seeing the changes. This proposed will just help us get that money back from the businesses that have been not paying their fair share, kind of. So, this isn't going to be a huge impact or any kind of impact towards our residents themselves. Most of them were either a wash, or there was a few that say it would save 30 to 40 cents, and there was a couple that were 12 or 14 cents in their fair share, and they're people that could handle it. I don't think if you're worried if it's like schools or anything like that, I didn't see the huge impact on those. We can look more into those, but I didn't see it there. It was some of our bigger businesses that use a ton of water that we seen it on. And then there was some other businesses that was going to go up, $20 or $30. I'm trying to think of the two small businesses we pulled up. I think they were $20 or $30 that they would be impacted, because a lot of them have smaller meters. So that base rate where Evan was talking about, that they'll have the base rate of the smaller meter, so they won't be impacted as bad. And then they just don't use a ton of water anyways. So it wasn't a huge impact.
A good example would be the Cottle Insurance Agency. They pay the non-residential rate, even though they have a 3/4 inch meter. And then I doubt they use 10,000 gallons of water a month, because they're not showering, they're just using the restroom. And so they're actually, this will actually probably reduce their rate, because their base rate would go down, and then they'd get charged only for the 3,000 or 4,000 gallons they use during the month.
And I was trying not to use names, but yes, he's absolutely right. So there's a couple of them that will see no impact, but there are some big businesses that will see some big impact. So, but I think that they can handle it, and they should pay their share. So,
I like it, the fair share.
Okay. So we'll proceed in this direction, and we're planning to bring all the utility rate adjustments to the council in June for approving the new rates that will take effect in July. So that's our plan. We wanted to talk about consideration number 3, which is related to sewer rates. So you can see, when it comes to sewer rates, residential users all pay a flat sewer fee. It's because sewage is not metered. So the residential users just pay a flat fee. But commercial users pay a sewer fee that has a base rate, and then it has an additional usage rate that's calculated based on water usage. So our proposal here is simply to increase the amount of each of the tiers so that the usage rate increases, which the proposal here is 25 cents added to each of those various tiered rates. And, you know, this is kind of the same idea that we didn't want to just keep increasing the base rate every year, but we felt like it made sense that some of the increase should also be applied to the tiered rates that are paid by some of the larger users of the sewer system. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay, we'll move forward with that, and we'll also complete the calculations that we're working on. Like I said before, the numbers that we've proposed tonight are kind of mid-process. We haven't fully completed the analysis of what revenues would be generated and what some of the costs are associated with water meters and so forth. So we'll refine the numbers, and then we'll come back to you and talk about it again as part of the fee schedule update. So that's my last slide. Were you hoping for another one?
On the agenda, we have minutes and storm fund, C and D.
So the storm fund is what we talked about with the error that we had made.
Oh, right, okay.
So
the minutes?
I'm not sure why that one was on there.
We think the person who put the agenda together accidentally pulled it down from a previous agenda. So
Okay.
there's not a discussion on minutes or the
Okay.
cost associated with them.
It was actually to discuss the minute
Yeah.
funds.
The minutes?
Minutes.
The minutes.
So,
I'm interested to see what that is, Carl.
there's really small ones.
Anything else, Evan?
So that's all I have tonight. We'll incorporate your guidance, and then we'll put this into the tentative budget for consideration.
Okay, thank
in,
you.
I think 2 weeks.
Regarding the budget discussion we've had this evening, is there any public comments?
Any difference in the budget discussion, or just like open comment?
Not yet. Okay.
That's coming next.
You bet.
I'm curious about this slide right here.
Would you give your name and address?
Keith Ash down at 193 Pleasant View Drive.
Thank you.
1 to 10,000 gallons, the proposed rate's 1.6, but then you get to the 11 to 29, and that jumps way up. But when you get down to 100,000, who's really using it, it goes down. Shouldn't that tier up and be more for them too? I'm missing that one a little bit.
So the reasoning behind this, council, is actually that those higher sewer flows actually help keep the lines clean because they're putting a lot of water through. It's a less concentrated effluent, if that makes sense. It's more water and less stuff that needs to be taken care of. And so it's actually cheaper for us to process it because they keep our lines clean, and for the plant to clean it because it's more water. So
But you said you didn't meter it, so how do you know how much you're putting down?
it's based on how much water goes into the building. So the amount of, that goes through the water meter.
I just thought that you had it backwards there. You know, accountants.
Thank you for your comment. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to public comments for other items.
Hello, I'm George Fuel. I live at 3658 Lakeview Drive. And Lakeview Drive is a 450 East turns into Lakeview Drive, so it's just up the hill a long ways. And my home is at the corner of Lakeview Drive and 450 East. And I just have a concern I want to share with you folks. 450 East, the back of their house and my house and all the homes above mine on Lakeview Drive are backed by a big vacant lot. I moved here in 2006, And as each spring when I was taking walks and such, I would notice on 450 East that a lot of water in the spring would be seeping out of the ground. The gutter was just full of water. The house just behind mine on 450, between the sidewalk and the curb, it was a bog in the spring. And that was just and I thought, other people I talked to said, there's underground streams up there. And it just every spring that happens. And in 2015, I experienced that when I added a room behind my garage, and they had to dig down quite a ways to get the solid dirt to put for a foundation, and about 11 feet to hit an underground stream. So, and then now I got a new room behind my garage with a basement unfinished with a sump pump, and the stream pumps up and out to the storm drain. So I know about underground streams. They're up there. Excuse me. My concern is what happened around 2016, further up on Lakeview Drive at the end where they're doing a new construction. They had a planning commission meeting here, and I came down and made a comment that I was concerned about what construction would do to those streams. And there were some people that were really upset about it, but I was assured that the construction people were doing all they could do. A year later, in 2000, started that construction, and in the wintertime, that was the year it snowed in January and February, got at 60 degrees, and everything melted, and flooding occurred. Well, up there, part of the flooding, there was a lot of homes up there that were, where I'm at, that were affected. The one at the very top, where it's not the top anymore, but before they started new construction, they're 2 or 3 foot of water in their whole basement. And 2 houses below that, their whole basement was wiped out. I had a lot of water in my basement. The guy behind me on 450, his basement was flooded. And a lot of it, I think, was because of the snow melting quickly and the water table came up. But I think that some of it might have been from disturbing these underground streams. I don't know for sure. But going up there was a lot of areas after they started the construction where water was coming up. And when all that water warmed up, when the snow melted, it all came down. So some of the flooding in my home was the water table, and some was coming down and in my window well, and that sort of thing. So my concern is and I've noticed since that construction's gone on up there, but on 450 East, there's more water up there than ever. And before, the water wasn't seeping out of the ground near my house and across the sidewalk. Now it is. About 2 weeks ago, it was so bad that the gutter was so full of water that it overflowed, and it was going down the street and over onto Lakeview Drive and down. So the water's, in my observation, is that it's changing. And we even called a public works guy. He came up and looked at it, and he mentioned that new construction was going to go on behind us shortly, whatever that shortly means. So I just want to express my concern that if and I know the planning council will look at it too, but I just want to make everybody aware of our concern, because there's more than just me up there, and we're all concerned that if they start disturbing that ground right next to our homes, that maybe it's going to cause more flooding for us. Having an underground stream in my house, I'm really concerned about it, and I just want to make sure that things are done right. I don't think a construction company can guarantee it won't happen, but I'm sure that they, before they do construction, that we as a city ought to make sure that they give a good plan and make sure that the homeowners up there are protected the best they can be, so we don't have flooding again. And that's just all I wanted to say. I just wanted to make you folks aware of that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Janice Schramm, 3724 Lakeview. I live a couple blocks up farther north than Mr. Fuel. In 2017, when they had just started, he talked to you about just starting the construction up there, and they had put a berm above our house. At that time, we were the last house before they started building the new houses. The construction company put a berm to the east of our house, and it changed the water flow. Instead of going straight down Lakeview that year, it came to the east of our house. And we were one of those that had our basements flooded. Our basement was completely flooded. It was a finished basement. It took us about 6 months to repair that, with lots and lots of people helping, with the impact of about $45,000, counting labor and all the materials, plus the time my husband lost from working, because he's a consultant for a company, actually a Navy base in California. So he had to spend his time fixing our basement rather than working. So up there, they had made these little dippets for the water to pond in different places. And one of the ones just above our house filled up with water, and there was no place for it to run. It seeped down in, and like you said, an unexpected warming that year, and it went into the ground and came up under the foundation of our house. We have a walkout basement, and it came out of the rock wall, not up high, but straight down, straight into our basement. So I know we're not going to recoup that, well, probably not, but my concern is what is going to happen in the future. We put in a French drain and tore up the whole basement, the concrete, everything. My concern is that you make sure that the construction companies you're not just relying on their reports, that you are actually relying on your engineering reports, because I don't think this problem is going to go away. The water has changed. The flow has definitely changed. And I just want you to make sure that we're protected, not just us, but the people who are building houses above us. So that's my concern also.
Thank you.
Oh.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on. The council, Councilman Turner,
I have nothing right now.
Councilman Barker,
Nope, nothing.
Councilman Swanson. Nope. Councilwoman Stoker.
Nope.
John.
Just one item, council, the moderate income housing bill that you've all heard about and probably read about, has passed. Our plan is this year to convene the general plan steering committee. I know several of you were on that in the past as council members, but we essentially need to reevaluate our moderate income housing component by December 1st. But that sounds a lot worse than it is. Moderate income housing doesn't mean low income housing. It just means housing that can be afforded by people who are in the bottom 50% of income countywide is kind of the way it's been. Well, they have different tiers, 80%, 50%, and 30% of income. And so, for example, the townhomes and the apartments down at the Village at Providence Point helped satisfy that goal of moderate income housing, because those units will be cheaper than the single family homes in the rest of the city. But we'll probably be reaching out to the existing members or the old members of the committee, seeing who wants to participate, and then looking for additional individuals. So if you have those you'd like to recommend, or we will also be probably reaching out on the city page and others and the city Facebook page for letting people know it's application so we can get people involved. It's usually a pretty large committee, lots of people, diverse backgrounds, and we'll probably meet once a month for the next 6 or 7 months to kind of reevaluate the goals and also pull open the general plan and fix some language tweaks that we've found that are punctuation errors that just need to be fixed to clarify the intent. So that's coming, and we will keep you updated.
Thank you. Annette? Dave? Tiffany? Chief?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Evan? Okay. I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.